You are about to listen to a conversation that I had with Tina Richardson, owner of Hometown Candle Company here in Arlington, Washington. Please be patient as you begin to listen, as we had some technical difficulties with both the audio and the video syncing. It does normalize somewhat after about 8 or 9 minutes. Tina has a really interesting story to tell. She has overcome some serious obstacles in her life and gone on to create this wonderful company where she has retailers in 46 states and in Canada. And here is the video. Welcome to Inspirational Women. Please subscribe to this channel and remember to click the bell to be informed of new episodes. Joining me today is Tina Richardson, owner of Hometown Candle Company in Arlington, state of Washington. Hi, welcome, Tina. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell us, Tina, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in California, but that was because my dad was stationed in the Air Force at George Air Force Base in Victorville, California. So my mom, who was basically born in Bellingham and raised in Blaine, moved down, obviously, to California. She really disliked it. She does not have the best to say about Victorville, but we didn't stay in California too long before we were back in Washington. So he was able to get stationed at McCord, which got us a little bit closer, and then eventually moved back into Blaine. So before I even started kindergarten, we were back in Blaine. So I went all through K through 12 in Blaine at Blaine Elementary, middle, and high schools. Definitely a hometown girl.
What did you think about doing, when you were a teen or early 20s? What were you thinking you were going to be doing with your...
It was high school. Obviously, we were trying to figure that out. I definitely was thinking college. I was going to be college bound. However, trying to apply and afford college, my mom was a single mom, just probably wasn't in the cards. And it was actually one of my high school teachers that talked to me. She was our home ec teacher, Kathy Wright, and she suggested becoming a nanny, which is what I ended up going ahead and doing. So that's what got me out of Blaine after high school. And
was that your goal, though, to leave Blaine?
No, goal was, at that point, I was just I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Looking back now, it's so key to who I am because I have such a creative brain that it jumps all over the place. A lot of it is, I want to try that, or I want to try that. And I didn't understand it at the time in high school why I couldn't figure out why I didn't have a path that I just really truly was destined to want to do. I loved kids, and at that point I did a lot of babysitting, so I thought, well, maybe I want to work for special needs kids, which is what, at graduation, when they say what you're going on to pursue, that's what they said, that that she was going to go work with special needs kids. Well, when college was kind of aside and then I decided to go and be a nanny, it kind of worked out because the family I ended up choosing was in Washington, D.C., or just outside of Washington, D.C. They were actually in Maryland, but they had 5 boys. They had a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6, 7, and 8-year-old. So all boys, 5 of them, but the 2-year-old had Down syndrome. It actually it led me to that. And he was the one I was probably the closest to. And I learned so much from him because I had to learn basic sign language. I would attend class with him 2 days a week, where he had to be, I had a bus that would come and pick both him and I up, and we'd go to the school. And I guess in a sense, that's the direction I went, but it's certainly not where I continued when I got home after my year was up.
That I think that's somewhat typical, though, because it's very young person to know what their long range goal is. Most people change careers multiple times. Well, not maybe not
Yeah.
most, but a lot of people change careers multiple times. And I read in your background that you have both a Norwegian and Icelandic heritage. Traditions passed down to you?
Definitely. The heritage is strong up in Whatcom County for both Icelandic and Norwegian. Staffold, the nursing home there, everybody called it, it was the Icelandic old folks home for, that's just what it was known as. My great grandfather was from Iceland and my great grandmother was from Norway, kind of having it on both sides. There's a lot of pride up there. There's a lot of Scandinavian pride in Washington in general. We definitely had our making lefse every year and krumkaka, and my mom on the Icelandic side loved vinatart. I carry a lot of pride knowing that is what my ancestors were.
And do you cook any of those dishes for your family now?
One of the traditions I've kind of carried for my daughter is that we make krumkaka every year. I do it the easy way now because I have an electric krumkaka griddle. I don't do it on the cast iron style that my grandma used to make it. And then lefse, it's more of a group effort. Lefse is a lot of work. So my Aunt Cheryl actually still does that twice a year. So definitely something. And then it's so funny to even make dinner like my mom used to call boiled potatoes elephant toes. And but they were in Norway, it's very, very basic, cooking that they do. It's usually like a meat, potato, vegetable. And a lot of it is boiled potato, but yeah, there's still so much I don't even realize that, have touches of Scandinavia to them.
What is that dish? You said you needed a griddle, a krumkaka or something. What is that?
Krumkaka is it's basically a batter that you mix up and then you pour and then you use cone like spindle, but it's just a crunchy cone cookie and you can fill it with whipped cream. We never really put whipped cream in it. We just like to eat it, just plain, but it's like a real thin, crisp cookie with a design on it. So of course.
So I'm thinking it sounds like one of those cones that you put ice cream in.
Yeah, it is. It's similar. They're smaller, so it'd be like a smaller waffle cone type feel to it.
So did you go from being a nanny into the healthcare industry after that?
Yeah, I moved home and then decided that I didn't want to go back to Blaine because it was too small and my eyes had been opened to the fact that there was this whole world. At that point when I moved to the East Coast, I'd never been off the West Coast. I hadn't even been to Spokane at that point. I hadn't even been to Eastern Washington. The extent of my travel had been Oregon and California. Came home and then my best friend from high school was going to UW. And so I actually moved down and we got a place together. And that is what led me into healthcare, which was because of one of my classmates from Blaine. She was working at Regents Blue Shield on the Boeing medical plan, got me an interview, and that led to 10 years with that company working for on Boeing's medical. Yeah, so again, it was this Blaine connection that led me to that. And I was living with a Blaine friend and hanging out with Blaine friends that had all moved to Seattle. So
Right. So what were you were doing medical billing or admin or?
I started in customer service and then I moved that's when they really started to do like call recording and call monitoring because Boeing was very strict. They had their own guidelines. So we just administered their plan. They wrote their own health plan and then we administered it. And it wasn't anything that even the attorney general could, people would say, oh, I'm going to get a hold of the attorney general and let them know what, or the insurance commissioner, there were always these complaints that they were going to do. And it's, it was kind of untouchable because Boeing wrote their own plan. So I ended up going into doing quality control. And so then that started me actually training some of the representatives, which, I just continued to kind of work my way up in the company and ended up in assistant management type medical review stuff. So was more definitely healthcare administration.
From healthcare, then, did you jump right into hairstylist?
No, that actually, I was at Regents Blue Shield for 10 years, and five years into Regents, they told us that they were going to move our location from Seattle to Burlington, Washington. And I decided that I didn't want to move. That was, taking me back to another county. And
Right.
so I kind of panicked and thought, well, what am I going to do? And ended up deciding that I would go to school to learn hair, hoping that maybe I could transition into that when I got laid off. Well, the layoff took 5 years to happen. So I went to school for a couple years, and then I started working evenings and weekends in a salon in Seattle in Belltown at an Aveda salon. I ended up kind of juggling both jobs, not wanting to quit my day job because I was wanting the layoff package.
Right.
And so it just ended up that I just ended up working a lot, but I was younger then, so I could do it. It didn't bother me as much. There was lots of fun that kind of came with that, because I ended up with doing hair. I ended up becoming an assistant for a makeup artist. And so I got to do a lot of his work that he was being hired to do, which was like with Pacific Northwest Ballet. We would do work on headshots. We did magazine hair for magazine interviews. We worked on a couple Seattle Film Festival movies. We did some T-Mobile commercials. I really lucked out with him being able to kind of assist him and get to do all this freelance stuff. It was really interesting, but it also made me realize that I really love to be in the chair more than I like to be behind the chair doing doing the services. I realized I just like to be pampered.
Yeah, who doesn't? But that sounded like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. I had some amazing experiences. I took some classes in London at the Aveda Institute. I got to go to Hair World in Las Vegas, which is like a big international where stylists from all over the world come, and really opened up a lot of really cool things. I mean, it was just, I look back now and see all these different paths that I kind of took and how they shaped me and opened up, people who came into my life that are still a part of it. And just I've had a pretty fun life. So
yeah, all those various experiences, it goes for anybody really. It helps shape you and your outlook on life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And travel especially.
Oh yeah.
You've stated that your mom passed, and that was a really difficult period for you to go through.
It was, yeah, she passed away in 2014. She was living in Blaine. She was she was really my only family at that point in Blaine. And so it was kind of other than seeing friends, it was my one reason to come home. And she passed suddenly. She wasn't well. I mean, she was suffering from pulmonary fibrosis, which is actually quite similar to what people are getting with COVID.
Right.
It's a respiratory, when you're in like respiratory distress. So she was on oxygen, but certainly we weren't thinking that she was going anywhere anytime soon. Really blindsided me. Until you actually lose your mom, it's something that I think, for the most part, unless you don't have a great relationship with your mom, it's a pretty life-altering thing. And I do find that when I meet other people that have lost their mom, there is almost like this instant bond, like, oh, that pain, and she was an amazing woman and very, very funny. She was part of the community theater there in Blaine. It really kind of stopped me in my tracks and made me reevaluate life in general and what my path was going to be, and also who I was as a mom myself. And some of that grief, I think, that I was feeling was the fact that my daughter was only 4 at the time. And they were so close, and it was such the amazing experience to see them together. And so I felt kind of cheated, that she was going to miss out on really knowing this remarkable woman. So
I can understand that. Was that around the same time that you were struggling with alcohol?
I actually was in treatment when she passed, and I
Oh,
was,
boy.
down in yeah, I was inpatient treatment down in Oregon when I found out. I had to make the decision whether or not I was going to come home and try and arrange all the services. I also had to kind of out myself because I had to contact family from there and tell them, where I was. With my mom's side of the family, I have a huge support system, and they all know too that our family history, our lineage is definitely, there's been quite a few of us that have struggled with alcohol addiction. So I wasn't alone. And they were amazing down in Oregon. I was at Hazelden and they were amazing. They let me make all of the arrangements from there. We just decided that we would postpone. I would stay and finish out my treatment. I knew my mom would want me to. I had just spoken to her 2 days before. We had a really good conversation. She was proud of me, but I was 9 days into treatment when she passed, and I stayed the full 30 and then went home and we planned her memorial for April. I wish I could say I stayed sober after that. I didn't, because obviously I was hit with a lot of life changes after that. And, anybody that knows people who have struggled is that it's a lot of times it's not a one or done, one and done.
I,
It takes time to kind of, it takes what it takes is what they say. And, I carried a lot of shame for that with some relapses, but I've realized that, it's just, that's what it took for me to learn how I wanted to live. And that experience now is so helpful to help others that are struggling. That it's a tough addiction to beat, but it's worth it.
yeah,
Definitely worth it.
and congratulations to you for taking care of yourself.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's hard to take care of somebody else if you're not taking care of yourself first.
Yeah,
So
definitely. They say it's like putting on the oxygen mask. You're no good to somebody if you aren't your best self,
I,
you have to.
in looking back, things, you perhaps may not have had such a hard time if the two hadn't coincided, the passing of your mom and being in treatment at the same time. That's a heavy burden to bear.
I mean, I realized I was now knowing, and I knew it then too. I was in the safest place I could be to be
Mhm.
processing those feelings. And even though I was separated from the rest of my family and my husband and my child, how blessed was I that I was in a facility that had mental health care and a chaplain
Yes.
and doctors and nurses. I mean, I couldn't have been in a better location to be processing that type of news. And so that, I think, is angels watching over me. I mean, it really is. So people aren't as fortunate. A lot of times they're just thrust right into having to make arrangements, and they're in that fog,
Yeah.
trying to, you
Difficult.
know,
You're now living a sober life.
yeah.
Then you transitioned into crafting and that kind of thing after your mom passed away.
Yeah, I worked at that point. I had been working in actual like healthcare, so I was scheduling appointments. I was helping people find specialists, doctors, and so a lot of times I was talking daily with sick people. When I had to go back to work after I came home, and we'd had the memorial, and then I realized here I am. I'm talking to people who are ill and going through a hard time, and emotionally I was lost. And so I'd always been a crafty person. I always loved whatever DIY you had. I was like, oh, I couldn't wait to do it. So I just started making signs, and I was just at home when I wasn't working, and I was painting and I was trying all these different things, and I realized how therapeutic it was. Once I realized how therapeutic it was, I didn't want to stop. That's when I thought, I'd heard about a shop that was opening up. I thought, I wonder if I could get like a vendor spot. We had gone through a shop and I saw that there were different vendors. So I got brave and went into a shop that had just opened up and asked if she was taking any vendors. She said no. And then she said, send me some pictures or, give me your social media info and I'll check you out. Well, I realized I didn't really have anything out of my social media. So I went home really quick and took pictures. And she called me the next day and said, I'd love to have you in the shop. I'll just make room for you. We'll just have a little space. That's how it started. It just kind of grew from there.
How wonderful. And I read that you said art helped heal my heart. Why do you think that was or is?
I know so many people now that it's such a part of healing. It's also why if you ever do go to treatment, it's definitely why a lot of them will teach art therapy. They have you create vision boards. I mean, it's all a way of being able to express yourself in a way. And it doesn't matter if you're good at it or, that's somebody else's opinion or your own opinion. We're our own worst critics, but there's just something to be said. If you know anything about art history too, I mean, check out, the bios on some of these artists, and some of them were pretty tortured people, yet that's, what they felt they could get out on canvas or they could work with their hands, and it helps to kind of heal.
Yes, I agree. You often read bios of singers and other very creative people who have had difficult backgrounds and their personality lends them more towards depression. Which from the outside you would never suspect that, would you? It's interesting. So there must be a connection between the creativeness and the sadder part of a person.
Yeah, I think too with depression, they tend to be people that are wanting to they want you to feel good.
Yes.
So you find it with a lot of comedians and that type of thing. So it's rather than putting the focus on themselves, they would much rather try and bring joy to somebody else, but yet they're suffering inside.
And then you moved to Arlington, and your business took another turn, and you created now it's called Hometown Candle. And here I just happen to have mine right.
Yay!
I have the lavender one, and it's just lasting forever.
Yeah, they do. We decided to buy a house, and we would have actually come back to Whatcom County, but my husband works at Boeing. He didn't want a long commute. We kind of talked about some areas a little further north. We were living in Mill Creek, South Everett area. And so we started looking at houses in Camino, houses in Stanwood. He mentioned Arlington, which by Arlington, I thought he meant like Smoky Point area right off of I-5. And I was like, I don't want to live in Smoky Point. And we happened to be looking at a house in Stanwood, and we were on Highway 9. We were going to stop for lunch, and he pulled off into this area. And suddenly we're in this main street of this cute little town. And I said, where are we? And he goes, this is Arlington. And I'm like, this is Arlington?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so cute. And so we started looking for houses, and literally like a few days later, we found a house, a 1904 house that, definitely I had to use my after eyes. It needed quite a bit of work. And so, but I could vision, what it could be. And we're still not there, but that was in 2016, So I think we'd lived there about 6 months when we were driving down the main street, saw an open storefront, and he said, hey, you should open a shop. And I laughed and said, yeah, right. At that point, I think I was in 3 or 4 different shops within Bothell and Snohomish. And I knew how much work that was. And I thought, I'm not going to open a shop. That's crazy. But he said, well, just think about it. And a few days passed, and I happened to be driving by myself. I saw a sign, the for rent sign. And so I just decided to pull over, and we knew one of the gals that owned a shop 2 doors down. And so I saw she was in. And so I pulled over and said, hey, do you know anything about this empty storefront here? And she walked me down to the neighboring business and said, I'm sure they know. And sure enough, they did. They knew the owner. We made an appointment with the owner, went and looked at it, and signed the lease that day. And then 9 days later, open this shop. And I had never been a business owner, didn't know what I was doing, but we opened up this little shop. And, and that was 2017. And I mean, here we are just a few years later, and it has evolved and taken so many twists and turns that I never in a million years would have figured out that I would have been making candles and owning a candle company.
It's just amazing. And you
Yeah.
say that you have retailers in 46 states.
Yeah, and Canada.
And Canada.
And
Good
Canada, yeah.
I mean, that takes a lot of work.
It does, but it takes a lot of work. But I feel, I mean, and I will just always say this, I feel I have angels. I really do feel like I have my mom's fingerprints all over this. This to me just isn't coincidence, the way things have kind of, come into play, how we've been found. I mean, the whole Grammy and MTV Movie Awards swag bags came because they reached out to us on Instagram. They saw us they didn't reach out on Instagram. They actually saw us on Instagram and then found our website and emailed us through the website. And I thought it was a joke. When this gal got a hold of me, I was like, okay, thinking she's in Nigeria in some, internet cafe trying to hack into my banking. She assured me she wasn't. It turned out that she was legit, and it just all kind of changed then. Lo and behold, the whole kind of real thing that got the ball moving. I mean, because that was great. I mean, to be able to say, okay, we're in those swag bags, but it was Evening Magazine. We ended up in 2019, we were on Evening Magazine. They aired it 4 times. The whole reason I was on Evening Magazine is because of recovery. One of the King 5 news anchors is in recovery, reached out to me. I'm friends with her. And she said, hey, I think Evening Magazine needs to know about you. I'm going to let them know. And that opened the door.
Sometimes things happen in life and it's just all meant to be. So you've switched now, you're a distribution center for you make your own candles and you make them soy. When I was researching, I mean, there's many other products that you could have chosen. Why did you choose soy?
We chose soy. Originally, the whole thing with candles started with me wanting to give back in recovery. I wanted to give back some way. And so that's when I started that Cup of Hope project, where I was, basically doing vinyl cutting and making cute little, inspirational quotes on mugs. And then I thought, you know what, I should make a coffee candle. And I had a friend who made candles. And so I ordered some supplies and she suggested soy. And, at the time I was like, okay, I don't know why. So that's what I started with. And then I was donating some of those proceeds. I had them for sale in 6 different shops. And then we would donate some of the proceeds to a charity it's a nonprofit called Hope Soldiers that helps with recovery addiction services. Hope Soldiers. There's a gal, Lindsay, that created that. She's in recovery herself. And she actually a few years ago did a documentary with Macklemore. And then President Obama was part of it, but it was aired on MTV originally, called Prescription to Change. And it was about the opioid crisis. She was a local nonprofit. I believed in what she was doing. And so it was just my way of being able to raise just, not much money. I wasn't selling the candles for a ton. And I had them in 6 shops, but it wasn't like they were, stocking hundreds of them, but it just felt good. It felt like the gifts that had been given to me and the help that had been given to me, it was my way of kind of creating something that I could, give back and help. And so that's how I started with the soy wax. And then really it was when we opened the shop in Arlington, I decided, I kind of had this idea, like, I love the Pacific Northwest. We should name them after towns. And in Arlington, we're kind of, we're part of that mountain loop highway. And a lot of people travel, they come this way, specifically to go that highway because it's so beautiful. And so I thought, wouldn't that be cute if we had like a Darrington candle and a Arlington candle, and then it just kind of grew from there that we had this candle wall. And that was really when I really started making the candles and I researched what type of wax I wanted to use. We just found that one, it's a cleaner wax. It doesn't have paraffin in it. I mean, there's quite a few different waxes now. There's apricot wax and coconut wax, and you can make lotion candles, but it's just, there's such a chemistry to making candles. People think it's really easy. And but you have to have the right size wick, and you have to do tons of testing. You have to calculate your burn times and make sure your flame's not too big. You want to make sure that the candle pools all the way, the wax pools all the way across when you're burning. So there were all these things that I didn't realize. So a lot of it's been trial and error, but we found a really high quality soy wax that we have stuck with, because one, I have fear of changing because it's like all that research is all back into play. And
I can tell you just from using it myself, typically when you have a candle that's in a jar and it burns, there's an excessive amount of wax that just doesn't go anywhere. But yours evaporate. It's not messy at all.
No, it really is. I mean, we use cotton wicks. They're not coated in chemicals to help them burn. I mean, we really try to go as natural as possible. And we're also very, very blessed to have a candle supplier locally in Everett, where a lot of states where candle makers have to order. I mean, we order quite a bit of stuff, but there are a lot of states that don't have large candle supplier warehouses that they can access. And wax is very heavy. We buy ours by their 50-pound cases, and we, typically will go and pick up 10, whereas most of those people have to have them shipped. And that alone, they'd have to sell $100 candle just to kind of make a profit.
Yes.
So we are really blessed to have a great facility.
And I love that you have the candles that are for the various cities or towns rather, but they also have not only their own name, but their own scent. How did you arrive at what scent are you going to use?
That was probably one of our most common questions when people would come in when we had the retail shop, and they'd say, what made you decide that, Blaine should be a volcano scent? And, what it came down to is, with some of them, they made sense, others they didn't. But we had already kind of tested enough candles, and when you're with a candle, you want a good cold throw, and that's before it's lit. So when you're just smelling the jar, and you want a good hot throw. So once it's lit, you want it to still be able to have because there are candles out there that you'll light and you're like, I can barely smell it. And that's part of the testing process too. So we had determined kind of, one, we were fortunate to have a retail shop that we knew what our best sellers were, because people would buy a candle and then they'd come back to buy another one because it's a consumable. Yeah. Then they're like, oh, I want to, I love that scent. I had to come back and get another one. So we could kind of track what our best selling scents were. So there were some scents that we did, match up to towns that we thought, oh, how about banana nut bread? And then it wasn't that big of a seller. And so we would switch it out. So some changed, but I mean, volcano, I chose its tropical fruit and sugared citrus. And it's only because, I love Birch Bay and it's the beach, even though it's not tropical. It just, something on the water. That was kind of how we chose it. We did a strawberry shortcake because for Marysville, and they have a strawberry festival. We did Fraser Fir for Leavenworth because it's a huge Christmas destination and smells, so that's our Christmas tree scent. And so some made sense, some didn't, but my focus was making sure it was going to be the best smelling candle, best high quality, best smelling.
And I saw on Instagram or Facebook, wherever I saw it, that you were either thinking about or have done something with pineapple. And I thought, oh God, that sounds really good.
Yeah, I did pineapple sage, and it is really, really good. And I hadn't actually made it into a candle because I also make room and linen sprays or car sprays. And I loved when I got the fragrance and I was testing it, I thought, immediately I thought, oh, this would make a really good room spray. And so that's actually how I kind of tested it. And then I just thought, just recently, I thought, that was such a great scent. I should not just let that kind of limit it to just one product. A lot of times I'm also thinking in terms of a business owner too, like, wouldn't that be cute? I could create like a little collection box where it's the pineapple sage candle and it's the pineapple sage, room spray, and I can make it a Mother's Day, type thing. So there's always these, things working in my
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah, good.
So
Where do you get the idea to use a specific scent? I mean, it's almost like you need a chemistry degree to which ones go well together.
a lot of it is my own personal preference, which I've realized I have to expand on that because I'm such a citrus girl. And so I'm immediately drawn towards anything citrusy. And
Uh-huh.
so I've been able to have some friends and where I get their opinion, and then I also research. I research to see. There's one of the candle suppliers. You can actually go and they'll tell you the best-selling fragrances in each state because they sell to all the states, and so they'll tell you what candle makers are buying for each state and what's their best sellers. Then that kind of helps me to figure out, like, especially now because we are across the U.S. and selling. So we find it's so funny that so many, like, even during like holiday time when we're all in Washington nesting and wanting Christmas smells and cozy scents, we were selling volcano, especially the tropical fruit and sugar citrus, like crazy, but it was going to the warmer southern places. And so they were still kind of in that mode. It's been interesting. It's been definitely a learning process to realize that not every state is the same. I've been able to kind of branch out with my scent selection.
Well, you've done really well. And I love that you are giving back to your community, not only your for the addiction, but also I read that you had donated to the Arlington Police Department for this, hand
Yeah.
sanitizer. And I think it's wonderful that you are contributing to your community also.
It's been such a important aspect to, there's so much that comes with that, having that hometown name, because I take a lot of pride in having named the business that, because my own hometown growing up in Blaine really formed who I am. But Arlington's been an amazing community. And my mom played Mrs. Santa up in Blaine for years. When she passed away, I had her outfit, and I decided when I opened my shop that I should do like a story time with Mrs. Santa. So I just decided I'm going to try on her costume. All those years that I helped her get into that costume and helped her get ready, here suddenly I was putting this costume on, and one of the one of the employees from the city of Arlington heard about it and said, "Hey, you should be in the Santa parade. We have a Santa, but we don't have a Mrs. Santa." And that kind of started that whole thing. And now I do it every Christmas time. I'm Mrs. Santa here. And it's that type of community feel. And then I was able and fortunate enough because whereas a lot of people really struggled this last year with the virus and closures, we really flourished. And I was able to give a large donation to our Arlington food bank, which brought a lot of pride because, growing up in Blaine, there were plenty of times that we had to get our food from the food bank. I think you become more successful when you're giving anyways. We are blessed back in many, many ways when we are able to give, and recovery is a big part of that too. I mean, you share what your experience, strength, and hope in recovery with others, and that's how life should be in general. I mean, it doesn't stop with just, recovery. This is our community. These are our people. We're a business here that pays taxes that helps our community. It's why shopping local is so important. We were able to do the food bank. We helped the Skagit Valley Helping Hands. We donated to this year. And now I'm partnering with a coffee company in Colorado called Wagon Coffee Roasters that their proceeds all go to help women in recovery. Coffee that is grown, the coffee beans, they in turn, it's an amazing company. They're in recovery themselves, and I stumbled upon them, and now we're working together, and they help support farmers who grow their beans, which helps those farmers' families and sustain those families. I mean, it's just this trickle down effect that you don't realize when you're not buying from the big conglomerate.
Well, you sure sound busy. Do you ever get any downtime?
We do. I mean, not very often. Luckily, we love what we do. My husband leaves Boeing and comes here right after work and works for a few more hours, and then we go home. And my daughter, I feel fortunate with the distance learning. I see her all the time because she's right here with us. And so it's why I kind of set, we have the production area and then a shipping area, my office, and then when I set up the big main room as kind of a living room look. We have a TV. She's got there's a couch, and I meant for it to look like an extension of home, because this is a family business. And so we do. I love to travel. I know I need that self-care, so
Because you'll burn out yourself if you
Mhm.
don't take good care of yourself. So Tina, where do you see your business in another 5 years or so? What do you see happening?
If it continues to grow like it's grown, I mean, especially even in just, a little over a year's time, I would love to be in all 50 states. We were supposed to go last October to Las Vegas to the resort and gift show to start getting the candles into some resort. They've rescheduled it for this fall, so we'll see if we get to go. But future wise, we would love for my husband to be able to leave Boeing and do this full time. And then we would love to bring on additional staff and let it grow and see where it takes us. It's so funny. Mainly, people work so hard because you work hard so that you can enjoy it. You can go on vacation, and a lot of times I have to reel myself back because I'm like, is this all worth it when it's so busy? But I know that there's greater good that we can do, and I'm just trying to take it a day at a time, like recovery. So one day at a time.
Well, congratulations. My gosh, you've really turned your life around, and with a successful business too.
It's
Great.
been amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me,
Yeah,
Tina. I hope I get to meet you in person.
I would
Right,
love that.
right now, I'm picking up your candles at Living Pantry here in Blaine, but
Yeah.
I could get down that way sometime too.
No, I
So
would love that.
thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Linda.